He was just a blind beggar, ignored by everyone, until he suddenly stood up in the middle of a crowded street and shouted, "Don't step in that car! It's a trap!" Seconds later, the most feared mafia boss in the city froze, because he recognized something chilling. The blind man knew his voice, and what happened next changed everything. Rain fell like needles, sharp and endless, turning the city into a blur of reflections and rushing shadows. People moved quickly, heads down, collars up, too busy to notice anything beyond their own urgency. At the corner of a crowded street sat a blind beggar. Most people didn't even register his presence. To them, he was just another piece of the city, like a broken bench or a flickering streetlight. But Elias was not ordinary. His clothes were worn, yes, his hands rough, his shoes nearly torn apart, but his posture was upright, controlled, his breathing steady. He wasn't begging the way others did. He was listening. Every footstep told him something. Every coin drop carried intention. Every voice revealed more than words. Elias didn't see the world anymore. He read it. A woman passed. Hesitant steps, nervous breath, lying about something. A man tossed a coin, fast, careless, guilt-driven. Two teenagers laughed, forced laughter, fear hidden underneath. Elias absorbed it all, because in a world full of noise he had learned to hear truth. And then, everything changed. A convoy of black vehicles rolled into the street. Engines low, expensive, controlled. The kind of presence that didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. People moved aside instinctively. The air shifted, and then a car door opened. Footsteps followed. Slow, measured, heavy with authority. Elias froze. His fingers tightened around his cup, because that voice, a single word spoken to a bodyguard, was enough. He knew it. Not just recognized it, knew it. Deep, calm, dangerous. The voice of a man who once decided whether others lived or disappeared. The mafia boss. Elias's breathing changed. Not fear, something deeper, something buried. Years ago, that voice had been the last thing he heard before his world went dark. And now, it was here again, closer than ever. Elias slowly stood. The crowd didn't notice, but fate did. The mafia boss stepped toward his car, bodyguards surrounding him like shadows with guns. Everything about the moment was precise, controlled, routine. But Elias felt something wrong, not in what he saw, but in what he didn't hear. There was a silence where there shouldn't be one, a stillness beneath the chaos, a tension in the air that didn't belong. And then, a faint metallic click. So small, no one else noticed, but Elias did. His head tilted slightly, his pulse quickened, because he had heard that sound before, years ago, just seconds before everything went wrong. Elias didn't think, he reacted. "Don't step in that car." His voice cut through the noise like a blade. The entire street froze. People turned. Bodyguards tensed instantly. One of them moved toward him aggressively. "Sit down before— That car is a trap!" Elias shouted again. Now everyone was watching. The mafia boss paused mid-step. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then, calmly, dangerously. "On what basis?" the boss asked. Elias swallowed. He couldn't explain it. Not fully. But he didn't need to. "I've heard it before," he said quietly. "Moments before people die." That sentence changed everything. The boss stared at him longer this time. Something in Elias's voice didn't sound like desperation. It sounded like certainty, and men like the boss trusted certainty. He took one slow step back, then spoke. "Check the car." The bodyguards moved instantly, weapons ready, eyes sharp. One opened the car door. Another crouched low, scanning underneath. Seconds passed. Then, "Boss, there's something." A shift in tone, subtle, but unmistakable. The boss didn't move. "What is it?" he asked. "A device. Carefully hidden, professionally done. Deadly." The crowd had no idea what had just been avoided, but the men around that car did. One wrong step, and the street would have been painted red. The boss slowly turned his head toward Elias, but something else happened. Something no one expected. The device blinked, a red light, active, a timer still running. "Clear the area," someone shouted. People screamed, chaos erupted, but Elias stood still, listening, because something felt wrong, again. "Wait," he said. No one listened. The guards rushed to disable it. One reached in, and suddenly Elias shouted, "Don't touch it!" Too late. The man froze, because the timer stopped, then reset. Silence. Elias's voice dropped. "It's not just a bomb. It's a signal." The boss narrowed his eyes. A signal for what? Elias turned his head slightly. For someone watching. And then, a distant engine roared to life. Another car, speeding toward them. This was never just about one explosion. It was a setup. Layered, precise, deadly. And it was still unfolding. The incoming car sped toward them, engine screaming. The bodyguards raised their weapons instantly. "Move the boss!" But Elias shouted again. "No!" Everyone froze, because his voice carried authority now. If he moves, he dies. The boss didn't argue, didn't question. He simply watched. The speeding car got closer, closer, and then it swerved violently, not toward the boss, but toward the bomb. Impact. A deafening explosion ripped through the street. Flames erupted, glass shattered, people screamed, but the boss was untouched because he hadn't moved. Elias exhaled slowly. "That was the real trigger," he said. "The bomb was bait." Silence followed, because now this wasn't just an attack. It was a message, and whoever sent it knew exactly how the boss operated, which meant only one thing. "They're inside," Elias said. Minutes later, Elias was no longer a beggar on the street. He sat in a quiet, guarded room, across from the Mafia boss. "You recognized my voice," the boss said. Elias nodded. "I remember everything." The room grew colder, because memory was dangerous. "Then you know warning me was a mistake," the boss said. Elias smiled faintly. "I also know you don't like betrayal." That word hit harder than anything else, because it was true, and because the attack proved it. "You think someone close to me did this?" the boss asked. "I don't think," Elias said. "I know." Silence. Then, "Prove it." Elias tilted his head, listening, not to words, but to breathing, to tension, to fear, and slowly. A new game began. The room was silent, thick with suspicion. Elias sat still, his head slightly tilted, as if listening to something far beyond the walls. The Mafia boss watched him closely now, not as a beggar, or not even as a witness, but as a problem. "You said you know who it is," the boss said. Elias nodded slowly. "Yes." "Then speak." But Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked a question. "Before I do, tell me something." The boss's eyes narrowed. "You're not in a position to ask questions." Elias smiled faintly. "Actually, I am, because I'm the only reason you're still alive." A pause. No one in the room liked that tone, but no one interrupted either. Elias continued. "The man who betrayed you, He didn't just plant a bomb. He turned his head slightly. He studied you. That landed. Hard. Your habits, your routines, your reactions. The boss leaned back slightly. Go on. Elias exhaled. And he knew you'd check the car. Silence. Because that meant the bomb wasn't meant to kill him. It was meant to control his movement, to force him into a second trap. Elias slowly stood up, and for the first time, he took a step forward without hesitation, without tapping, without feeling his way. One of the guards noticed instantly. His eyes widened. Boss! Everyone turned. Elias stopped, smiled, and opened his eyes. Not fully blind. Not anymore. I needed you to believe I was, he said quietly. The room exploded into tension. Hands moved toward guns, but the boss raised his hand, stopping everything. Why? He asked. Elias looked straight at him now. Because blind men hear things others don't. He paused. But men who can see, they understand how to end it. The room had changed. What started as an interrogation had become a chess game, and Elias had just flipped the board. You've been lying this whole time, one guard snapped. Elias didn't even look at him. Yes, he said calmly, but not about what matters. The boss leaned forward. Then tell me what does. Elias turned his gaze slowly across the room, not randomly, deliberately, studying, watching reactions, and then he stopped, not on the man who had been exposed earlier, but on someone else. A man who hadn't spoken once. The boss's right-hand man. Quiet, loyal, invisible. Elias smiled faintly. Interesting, he murmured. The boss noticed immediately. What? Elias tilted his head. You chose him well. The man stiffened. Only slightly, but enough. Careful, the man said calmly. You're stepping into something you don't understand. Elias laughed softly. No, he said. I understand it perfectly. He took a step closer. You didn't plant the bomb. Silence. But you made sure it happened. Now the room was frozen, because that accusation was worse than betrayal. It was orchestration. The boss turned slowly toward his right-hand man. Explain. The man didn't panic, didn't deny. Instead, he smiled, a slow, cold smile. You always trusted him more than me, he said quietly. That was the truth, and it changed everything. Years ago, Elias said quietly, there was a shooting. The room went still, because everyone knew that wasn't just history. That was a wound. I was there, Elias continued. I heard the order. He looked directly at the boss. You gave it. The boss didn't deny it, didn't flinch. Yes. Elias nodded. I lost my eyes that night. A pause. Then, no, the right-hand man said suddenly. Everyone turned. Elias's expression didn't change. Say it, he said softly. The man stepped forward. You didn't lose your eyes because of him. His voice hardened. You lost them because of me. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Because now, the truth was unraveling. I changed the plan, the man continued. The boss wanted intimidation. I wanted elimination. The room felt colder. I made sure no one survived that night. He smiled slightly. But you did. Elias exhaled slowly. Yes. And I've been waiting ever since. Now the boss understood. This wasn't random. This wasn't revenge. This was something much deeper. Something calculated. You've been planning this, he said. Elias nodded. For years. Everything snapped into place. The bomb, the warning, the timing. It wasn't coincidence. It was design. You set this up, the boss said. Elias didn't deny it. Yes. The guards shifted uneasily, because now no one knew who was in control. "Ain't you saved me to get to him?" the boss asked. Elias shook his head slowly. "No." He stepped closer. "I saved you because I needed you alive. That was worse. Much worse." "Why?" the boss demanded. Elias smiled faintly. "Because dead men don't lose everything." Silence. Then, "You do." The meaning hit instantly. Reputation, power, control, everything the boss had built could be destroyed without killing him. Elias turned slightly toward the right-hand man. "You wanted power," he said. The man didn't deny it. "I took it." "For a while," Elias replied. Then he looked back at the boss. "But now, you know." And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Truth, because in this world, truth didn't just expose people, it ended them. The boss stood slowly. The room held its breath. Then he spoke. "Leave us." No one moved. "Now." The guards hesitated, then obeyed. The door closed. Only 3 men remained: the boss, the traitor, and Elias. And for the first time, no one knew how this would end. The door shut behind the last guard with a soft, final click. Now it was just the 3 of them. The Mafia boss, his most trusted lieutenant, now exposed, and Elias, the man who had walked in as a beggar and somehow taken control of everything. Silence stretched across the room like a drawn blade. "You set this all up?" the boss said slowly, his voice low and controlled. Elias didn't deny it. "Yes." The traitor laughed under his breath, but there was tension behind it now. "So what?" he snapped. "You think this changes anything? He'll still trust power over truth." Elias tilted his head slightly. "No," he said. "He'll trust survival." That word landed hard. Because survival was the only rule that truly mattered. The boss's eyes shifted between them. "The bomb wasn't meant to kill me," he said, thinking aloud. "It was meant to move me." Elias nodded. "Into the second trap." "And you stopped it," the boss added. "I redirected it," Elias corrected. That distinction mattered. A lot. The traitor's confidence began to crack. "You're bluffing," he said. "You don't have anything real." Elias reached slowly into his coat. The room tightened instantly. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a small recorder and pressed play. The voice that filled the room was unmistakable. The traitor's, confessing, planning, detailing everything: the bomb, the setup, the betrayal. The man's face went pale. "You? How did you?" "From the moment I heard your breathing in that room," Elias said calmly. I knew you were hiding something." He stepped closer. "You speak with confidence, but you breathe like a man who's already lost." Silence. The boss now understood everything. Not just the betrayal, but Elias. "You didn't come here for revenge," he said. Elias shook his head. "No." "Then why?" Elias met his gaze. "To end the illusion." The air felt heavier now, like the room itself understood that something irreversible was about to happen. The traitor took a slow step back. "This doesn't end here," he said, his voice sharper now. "You think one recording destroys me?" Elias didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned slightly toward the boss. "Ask him," Elias said quietly. The boss frowned. "Ask him what?" Elias's voice dropped. "Who else is involved?" The room froze. Because that question was bigger than betrayal. It meant this wasn't just one man. It meant something deeper, something spreading. The boss turned slowly toward his former right-hand man. "Well?" The man hesitated, just for a second. But that was enough. There's always more, he said finally. You built this empire on fear. Did you really think it wouldn't grow beyond you? That answer was dangerous, because it was true. The boss's jaw tightened. And the attack today? He asked. A test, the man replied. To see how you'd react. To see if you were still worth replacing. Silence. Elias watched carefully, because this moment, this exact moment, was the turning point. You see it now, Elias said. The boss didn't respond, but his expression had changed. Cold, decisive, final. The traitor saw it too, and panic finally broke through. You need me, he said quickly. I know names. I know operations. I can help you stop it. A gunshot cut him off. Sharp, loud, final. The man dropped instantly. Gone. No drama, no second chances, just silence. The boss lowered the gun slowly, then looked at Elias. That's the cost of truth, he said. Elias nodded. Yes. But the real question, the boss continued, is what comes next. Rain had started again outside, soft at first, then heavier, like the city itself was trying to wash something away. Inside the room, only two men remained, the Mafia boss and Elias. You exposed him, the boss said quietly. Yes. You saved me. Elias paused, then shook his head. I saved the moment. That answer lingered, because it meant something deeper, something the boss was only beginning to understand. You planned this, he said. The street, the warning, the timing. Elias nodded once. Yes. Why? Elias walked slowly toward the window. Rain tapped against the glass. Because men like him don't destroy empires, he said. They reveal them. The boss watched him carefully. And me? He asked. Elias turned slightly. You built something powerful, he said. But you also built something fragile. Silence. Fear doesn't create loyalty, Elias continued. It creates opportunity. The boss exhaled slowly. For the first time, there was no argument, only understanding. You could have exposed me too, he said. Elias didn't deny it. I still can. That truth sat between them, heavy, unavoidable. Then why didn't you? The boss asked. Elias looked at him directly. Because ending you, he said softly, would be easy. He paused. But changing what comes after? That's harder. The boss studied him, long, carefully. You're not what I expected, he said. Elias gave a faint smile. I learned from the best. That answer carried weight, because it was both respect and warning. Elias turned toward the door, then stopped. One last thing, he said. The boss waited. The recording, Elias continued. It doesn't just expose him. A pause. It exposes the cracks. Realization settled in. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of pressure, attention, uncertainty, the kind that could tear an empire apart slowly, from the inside. Elias opened the door. Rain echoed louder now. You didn't just see the truth, the boss said quietly. Elias stepped out. I listened to it. And then he was gone, back into the world, not as a beggar, not as a victim, but as the man who walked into darkness and forced it to reveal itself. Behind him, the boss stood alone, not defeated, but no longer untouchable. And somewhere in the city, as the rain kept falling, the story continued, because truth never really ends. Rain drummed against the warehouse windows as Elias sat in the corner, listening. The city beyond was alive, unaware of the storm he had orchestrated. The Mafia boss was still processing the recording, the traitor eliminated, the subtle cracks in his empire now exposed. Elias, however, had bigger plans. He had been invisible once, forgotten by the world. Now he observed everything, every sound, every movement, every lie. Years of surviving, adapting, and watching had led him here. Footsteps echoed. Elias didn't flinch. He expected company. A guard? Another player in the city's dangerous chess game? "I wondered when you'd show up," he said calmly. A figure emerged from the shadows. She'd light on his feet, precise. "You've made waves. The boss isn't used to being observed. You've destabilized him." Elias smiled faintly. "I didn't destabilize him. I made him aware." The figure studied him. "Awareness can be fatal. Do you know what you've done?" "I know exactly what I'm doing next," Elias said. Silence filled the warehouse. Elias stepped toward a table cluttered with files, maps, and devices, tools of influence, carefully orchestrated threads ready to reshape the city. "I've watched for years," he said. "I survived, learned every weakness, every crack in the armor. Now it's time to test the empire." The figure nodded. "And if it doesn't survive?" "It collapses," Elias replied. "But not by my hand alone, by the men who believed themselves untouchable, by the lies upon which their power rests." Outside, the city continued unaware. Traffic, distant sirens, muffled voices. Inside, Elias's mind worked, calculating every outcome, every reaction. The past had taught him empires built on fear were fragile. Tonight, the final moves would be made. The network of betrayal he had studied for years would either crumble or reshape the city's power forever. Elias stood by the window, watching the streets glisten with rain. Every detail mattered. The guard patterns, the boss's routines, the hidden agendas. One mistake, one misstep, and everything would collapse. And Elias had ensured that no mistake would be unaccounted for. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside him, chaotic, relentless, inevitable. Because survival was no longer enough. Control, vision, and truth would decide the outcome. And Elias saw it all. The morning arrived gray and heavy with drizzle. Rain softened the edges of the city, washing the streets clean, or at least giving that illusion. Elias walked calmly through narrow alleys, every step precise. This was the final act. From his vantage point atop a rooftop, he observed the city. Cars moved below. Pedestrians crossed streets unaware of the coming upheaval. Every detail, the boss's movements, his convoy, every habit, had been studied. Every action anticipated. Elias reached into his coat. The recordings were ready. Proof of betrayals, hidden crimes, manipulation, all encrypted, sent to contacts across the city. Within hours, the underworld would fracture under suspicion and fear. A figure appeared behind him, the same man from the warehouse. "You're going to change everything," he said. "Are you ready for the chaos?" Elias didn't turn. "Chaos is inevitable. I just give it direction." The city's power structures, built on fear and deception, were fragile, and Elias had become the unseen force exposing every weakness. He activated the encrypted transmissions. Evidence spread quietly but effectively. The Mafia boss's empire would feel tremors within hours. Alliances would break. Trust would vanish. Secrets exposed. The figure nodded and melted into the shadows. Elias remained, silent, patient, watching the storm he had engineered. He had entered as a beggar, a victim. Now he would leave as a reckoning. The rain intensified. People hurried beneath umbrellas, unaware of the battle unfolding in silence. Elias melted into the crowd. Behind him, the boss stood alone, realizing for the first time he wasn't untouchable. He had survived attacks, betrayals, and explosions. But Elias had exposed the cracks that no power, no fear, could repair. Elias disappeared into the alleys, unseen but unforgettable. The city would never forget the man who could see everything, the blind beggar who survived, observed, and orchestrated the final reckoning. And Elias, he would never need to be seen again. Because in a world built on lies and fear, the man who truly saw always controls the ending. If you were shocked by Elias's final move, subscribe now. Because in a city built on secrets and fear, truth always finds its way.